Scotland's Economy Secretary Mairi McAllan has announced that she's pregnant with her first child and hopes to return to work as a young mother in March next year. She took to social media to share her news and insist that starting a family should never be a barrier to holding senior positions. That was a sentiment endorsed by her boss, Humza Yousaf, who said that he hoped her example would inspire other women into politics. We reflected on this turn of events and discussed how family-friendly Holyrood is with the Press Association's Scottish political editor Katrine Bussey and the former Labour MSP and mother of two, Jenny Marra, who stepped aside from politics in 2021. Katrine, Mairi McAllan saying that there should be no barriers, and that's an understandable sentiment, but is it the reality, certainly in the Scottish Parliament?
Well, the simple truth is that we really don't know, because we've not seen a woman come back from maternity leave and go into a job at such a senior level for a prolonged period of time. Ruth Davidson, of course, took time out when she had her baby back in 2019, her young son, and she came back but stood down as Scottish Conservative leader within a matter of a few months, citing the difficulties, I think, in juggling the work-life balance, amongst other issues she had, you know, with the Brexit vote and Boris Johnson taking over as the Tory leader. But I think, you know, the difficulties in work-life balance were part of that for her. And of course, Kate Forbes was the first member of the Scottish Cabinet to take maternity leave. She actually came back a little bit early because she took part in the SNP leadership contest. But the results of that contest meant that when she went back to work properly, she went back to work as a backbencher. So the simple truth is we don't know how this will work out.
Jenny, you were a politician in the Parliament, and now you've got two young children and are no longer in the Parliament. Are these two things connected?
Yes, I think they are. I made a conscious decision that I wanted to sit out this Parliament and to be at home with the children, and I'm in a fortunate position I was able to take that decision. But it's also there are certainly things in the Scottish Parliament that could make it easier for mothers of young children. And I don't say that lightly, because what we need in politics is for everyone to be around the table. We can't make balanced decisions for Scotland if mothers and people with experience of being a mother of young children are not represented. And I think there are a few radical measures that the Scottish Parliament could take to facilitate that. I saw Mairi McAllan's comments the other day saying, I think she said she was keen to get back to work, you know, as soon as she could after a few months. I would actually like for that whole conversation to be changed a bit, because you've got people like Naomi Einstein, the government's own poverty czar, or was an expert on childcare, campaigning to say that maternity leave should be a year. And I would like it if we had more of a conversation that was just expected of, expected that was acceptable to take a year. Obviously, it's up to every individual woman to make that choice, how long she wants to take. But if we can make it more acceptable that a year is a good period to take, instead of this kind of, I think, bit of a macho conversation about how soon can you get back to work, I think that would be helpful for families, for children and for women.
And Jenny, do you think that puts pressure on women then?
What puts pressure on women? There is a pressure to get back to work ASAP.
Yes.
I think perhaps there is a bit of pressure, maybe especially in senior jobs. And Mairi McAllan is in a really senior job. And the political environment is highly charged. It is still macho. You know, I remember my last job in the Scottish Parliament was chairing the Public Audit Committee, and I was the only woman. I was chair, and the rest were men for a large period of time. And I remember one morning them saying to me, "Why are we starting at 10 and not at 9 a.m. or 8:30?" And I said, well, the truth is, we're starting at 10 because I can breastfeed my son and then get to Parliament from Dundee in time to chair this committee. That's the reason we're starting at 10 this morning. But if you're not prepared to have these conversations publicly and say these things, then the status quo of the sort of male preference of working and the families not considered and young children not considered in that round. I think it's important to say these things publicly.
And Katrine, was the Scottish Parliament not set up with the intention that it was going to be more family friendly?
It always was meant to be more family friendly, and certainly we don't see the very late sittings that they have at Westminster, which completely would clash with family life. But at the same time, politics, when you're at that very senior level that the likes of Mairi McAllan is at, it's not a 9-to-5 job. You can't just shut down your computer, put your phone in your bag and go and pick up your child from nursery at 5 o'clock because the working day is done. That's not how it's going to work. So there needs to be conversations about the support that is available for mothers and for parents actually of all genders. This conversation shouldn't just be talking about working mothers, it should be talking about and working parents, because I think there is still too much in society, perhaps, the expectation that the burden of parenting throughout a child's life will fall on the mother. I think it's...
Just one point though, a Cabinet Secretary earns close to £120,000 a year. More broadly, does that make the support required to return to work that bit easier?
Well, obviously it will do. There will be more choices that are available with that kind of salary than if you're a woman who's on a minimum wage job, a low earner, or somebody who's perhaps working in a care home and working shifts, unsociable hours. Certainly money always makes things easier, but there does need to be a look at how we make it easier for mothers across all walks of life to get back to work. Because what Jenny said is absolutely right. Our Parliament will be a better Parliament if it is representative of our society, and that means having mothers in at all levels. And
on that, Jenny, you suggested the Parliament could... Sorry, carry on.
Can I just say, a kind of idea that Holyrood is better than Westminster at this, I don't believe to be true. And we have seen quite a lot of late sittings recently. If you look back to the gender debate before Christmas last year, it's extremely late sittings. I think Jeremy Balfour made a point of order about being a carer and needing to get home. You see this towards the end of every other Parliament. Westminster has a fully funded and very good nursery, and many female MPs take their children with them and have them looked after in a very high care quality setting on site. Now, Holyrood just doesn't have that. It has a creche and it is limited to 4 hours. I remember speaking in the budget debate once and got a phone call from the creche to go because they couldn't settle my son, and I had to sit breastfeeding him while the presiding officer was calling me to speak in the budget debate, and I missed the slot and had to speak later. Holyrood is not set up. I'm an hour's train ride from Edinburgh, but you've got mothers, I suppose, like Kate Forbes, whose family home is hours and hours from the Parliament. I think we should be looking at proxy voting, at 75% group voting, so the whips can allow people to be away. I think we should be looking at a much better and full-time shared childcare facility, perhaps with some other employers in Edinburgh, because as Katrine and I both agree, it is important to have women in Parliament.
And fundamentally, just a point that Jenny made right at the beginning, Katrine, basically it comes down to each individual parent's choice.
Absolutely, and we can look internationally at women in politics, at Jacinda Ardern, the former New Zealand Prime Minister, who had a baby during her premiership, and then herself and her partner chose for him to take an extended period of leave so he could care for their young child after she took an initial period off. So I think families need to look at what works for them, but there needs to be support available so that they can make the right choices for them.
Well, thank you both for joining us, and we wish Mairi McAllan well. Thank you for joining us in Scotland tonight.